In the northwest of England, hidden in the deep, muddy waters of stagnant ponds, a hungry monster waits for unsuspecting children to wander past. The monster has long hair covered in weeds, green skin, and eyes the size of tea saucers. She uses her long fingers and sharp nails to catch her victims, and just when they cry out for help, she sinks her fangs into them and drags them underwater. Jenny Greenteeth is a supernatural creature from English folklore, particularly in stories from around Lancashire. Some folklorists refer to her as a freshwater fairy. Others dismiss her as a nursery bogey. The earliest recorded reference to this creature comes from the Victorian period, but it's unclear how long she's been swimming around before then. Freshwater fairies don't get the same love as their saltwater counterparts, and it's understandable. Mermaids have the advantage of being beautiful and also inhabiting an ecosystem that is so unfamiliar and unknowable to humans. The ocean is vast and terrifying, but a little pond in your village? Not so much. Nevertheless, freshwater ecosystems possess their own dangers, and as any viewer of this channel knows, where there is danger, folklore is soon to follow. So today, we are diving into the murky origins of Jenny Greenteeth, the freshwater fairy of English folklore. I'm Nicole Miras, and this is Fireside Fables. Today I'm having one of my blends, actually. This is a white tea with rose. Those pair really well together. So if you like putting rose into your teas, I would recommend white tea. If you're a fan of Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, then you've probably met Jenny Greenteeth before. This is actually how I first met Jenny. She makes an appearance in the opening chapter of The We Free Men, and the young witch Tiffany Aching hits her over the head with a frying pan. Pratchett, of course, was known for weaving in different elements of British folklore into his books, and Jenny Greenteeth, it could be said, was put back on the map for the general public thanks to her appearance in The We Free Men. She is a pretty striking monster. Long hair, green skin, of course, green teeth, giant eyes, and hands that are poised to snatch you without warning. Jenny was a nursery bogey, a character used to frighten children from dangerous situations, like falling into a pond and drowning. The We Free Men was published in 2003. By then, it wasn't really socially acceptable to use the threat of monsters to control your child's behavior. Which actually reminds me, I should totally do an episode on Krampus for the holiday season. If that is something that you would be interested in, let me know below. Today, parents generally prefer the carrot over the stick. If you behave well, Santa Claus will leave you presents. If you brush your teeth, the tooth fairy will leave you money. But Jenny Greenteeth comes from an older time when a child surviving to adulthood wasn't a given. And from that perspective, it makes sense why parents would use any tool in their arsenal to keep their children safe. Okay, but there are plenty of murderous freshwater fairies to be found in folklore. Jenny Greenteeth comes from a specific place, right? Her stories mainly originate from the county of Lancashire in the northwest of England. Why did this region produce this monster, and how far back does her story go? Folklore doesn't exist in a vacuum, and Jenny really embodies this. Or I should say, Jenny really embodies the landscape that she comes from. Because even before the Industrial Revolution, Lancashire had a lot of freshwater ecosystems, wetlands like marshes, peat bogs, and numerous rivers that empty into the Irish Sea. Even by British standards, it is very wet. Communities in that county can get anywhere between 40 to 53 inches of rain each year. That's about 99 to 135 centimeters. It's a lot. Then you have the Industrial Revolution, which utterly transformed this part of England. Lancashire became the center of industrial textile manufacturing and a major region for coal mining, resulting in rapid urbanization and environmental destruction. This also meant the increased emergence of artificial bodies of water, like mill ponds, drainage ditches, industrial reservoirs, flooded pits, and quarries. This, coupled with the population boom, created the ideal conditions for stories of Jenny to spread. On top of that, stagnant, nutrient-rich water provides the ideal conditions for the growth of Lemna minor, or common duckweed. Left unchecked, this plant has the capacity to grow in a tight, dense mat that, in poor lighting, could look like a grass lawn. In fact, we have accounts from the second half of the 19th century that in some parts of the Midlands, plants found in ponds, like common duckweed, were colloquially referred to as Jenny Greenteeth. You can see how an inattentive child traversing this rapidly changing landscape could get themselves into danger by falling into a pond covered in duckweed. Does Jenny predate the Industrial Revolution? Well, it's hard to say. The earliest reference to Greenteeth comes not from a book of fairy tales or from a nursery rhyme, but a work of political satire from 1831. Note that Liverpool at this time was part of the county of Lancashire, though today it's officially in Merseyside. One of Liverpool's MPs, Lord Sandon, was canvassing in St. John's Market when he kissed a well-known produce seller named Hetty Taylor. The press relentlessly mocked him for this. The satirical piece features Lord Sandon kissing a produce seller named Eddie Greenteeth, after which she says that she'll tell her dear, presumably her husband, to support his campaign. Obviously, this is very different from the monster Jenny Greenteeth, but here we have a character named Greenteeth associated with produce or plants. Whether or not there was already a freshwater fairy haunting the minds of children, we don't know for sure. But I think it's fair to guess that this wasn't Greenteeth's first outing. Now, why do I say that? Well, we do know that she was an effective nursery bogey by the year 1850. In an article on the Peel family in the Manchester Examiner and Times, there's a passing reference to Jenny Greenteeth, who is described as a sore terror to rambling children. It goes on to say, she was supposed to crouch at the bottom of stagnant ponds, from which, when an opportunity offered, stretch out her arms to seize upon unwary ones. 2 years later, in an article in the Preston Chronicle, a writer noted that old, superstitious women whose childhoods would have passed many decades before, would tell stories about Jenny Greenteeth riding on a broomstick. In 1855, another writer from the Liverpool Daily Post reminisced about a local pond from his childhood that was called Jenny Greenteeth. It's possible that you may have heard of a similar creature called a Grindylow. If you've read Harry Potter, then you've met a Grindylow already. Grindylows also come from the same region as Jenny Greenteeth. They also are described as green freshwater fairies that drown children. However, unlike Jenny, they are typically small, diminutive, humanoid creatures like goblins. However, and this is where things get interesting, the earliest known reference to a Grindylow comes after Jenny Greenteeth, in an article published in Manchester in 1852. Several years later, the antiquarian John Higson wrote about the Grindylow and Jenny Greenteeth as aqueous nymphs, or nixies. A nixie is a shape-shifting water spirit from German folklore. There is some possibility that the name Grindylow is connected to the monster Grendel from Beowulf, who was also described as living in wetlands. But there is an 800-year gap between these two, so we can't say for certain if there is a connection or if Grendel was a partial source of inspiration for Jenny Greenteeth. What we can say for certain is that Jenny Greenteeth was a fully formed character by the mid-19th century. Over the decades, the stories began to diversify, and there are different accounts of Jenny Greenteeth being used to scare children from all kinds of environments, including canals, rivers, and even railway lines. Jenny Greenteeth even got a mention in Catherine Briggs' Dictionary of Fairies, which was published in 1977. Folklorist Roy Vickery, writing in 1983 about the connection between Jenny Greenteeth and common duckweed, mentioned that Jenny was still being used as a nursery bogey in Liverpool at the time of his writing that article. In 2019, the folklorist Simon Young published this map in his article about Jenny Greenteeth. The circles represent supernatural references to Jenny, and the stars are bodies of water that are named after her. You can see that references to Jenny are mainly clustered in the northwest northwest of England and particularly in Lancashire. But he mentions that during the Victorian period, Lancashire had an especially active community of folklorists, so it's possible that this explains the outsized presence of this region in the written record. Despite the persistent hyper-regionalism of this character compared to, say, a flower fairy or a brownie, Jenny Greenteeth endured. It's especially remarkable when you consider that she remained in folklore during and after the great sanitization of the fairy, which is something that we've talked about a lot on Fireside. It was during the Victorian and Edwardian periods that fairies became child-friendly, and this coincided with industrialization and urbanization. As nature was tamed and subdued, fairies grew more and more diminutive until they were finally pretty much harmless. But Jenny Greenteeth is an exception. As the hills and moors of Lancashire faced a tidal wave of industrial expansion, Jenny Greenteeth emerged as a threat, in spite of, or maybe because of, this transformation. Fairies in literature, at least for adults, are becoming scarier again, and I often wonder how our own period of environmental degradation might play a role in this. The concept of a quaint and gentle nature spirit doesn't ring as true today. With that in mind, as sea levels rise and flooding becomes more common, maybe Jenny Greenteeth will evolve to meet the current moment. And after the latest storm, when the dip in the road outside your house or the storm drains along the street are flooded once again, you might catch something from the corner of your eye. Something with long hair and sharp teeth watching you. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe, and if you really enjoyed it, please share it with a friend or two. Be well, and I'll see you next time.